put out an opinion poll.
This is a Kanvinde building that was built in 1968. The exposed brick is a sort of salam to Ahmad Shah's original architecture and the old fort wall that still exists. And Amma used to study in Shantiniketan where nature was very much a part of it. So there are trees growing in the middle and all the spaces are open and not locked in. So you have a feeling of being outside. And I think that was a very important part of it and all of us enjoy that. Now, of course, that climate change has completely changed our monsoon patterns. It's slightly problematic.
How comfortable or how many of the younger Gujaratis at least know enough about their quote-unquote Islamic past, or are and is it vilified in public discourse?
Yes.
Or is it?
Yes, of course it is. In 2011, Ahmedabad turned 600 years. And we created a project, a performance called Kadak Badshai. Kadak Badshai is the tea that I grew up with, which you drank for your exams and which truck drivers drank to be able to drive for 24 hours. And it's a typically Ahmedabad thing.
Does it have something in it?
Yeah, it has lots of masalas in it, and it's I mean the spoon standing up that much, and it was a performance that celebrated the city's multiple strands. You know, this is a city that was made partially by the Dutch, partially by the British. The Gujarati language itself only came into being in its current form because of a Britisher called Forbes. And there were the Dutch, there were the Portuguese, there were the Jains, there were the Hindus, there were the Voras. And the performance piece celebrated all of this. And from originally running it for 3 nights, it ran for 55 nights.
Wow.
Completely full houses. And we could have run it for much longer. And it was such a fun piece and it made people so nostalgic about Ahmedabad that I had people coming from the ruling party and holding my hand and saying, Mallika Ben, we were mistaken about you. You love Gujarat and you love Ahmedabad.
So you had BJP guys come and clap and celebrate.
And sing with us and dance with us. And
wow.
It was amazing.
That's the power of art.
That is the power of the arts.
Welcome to another election show. We have a really special guest with us today, Mallika Sarabhai. You are an artist, an actress, a dancer, an activist, a very vocal proponent of communal harmony, and you wear a lot of hats. And our audience must be wondering, why are we doing this interview during elections? So just let me tell you why. Because as we were, traveling around in Ahmedabad, we've just landed. Most people here, and especially the young people that we speak to, they don't know of a Gujarat other than that governed by the BJP. So a lot of the people, in fact, young kids that we met born, in 2002. And so it's interesting, and we associate Gujarat with Modi, of course, Amit Shah, with BJP, with business, with Adani now. But there's also another side to Gujarat, which I think Mallika would be able to best talk about because you were born here in 1953. You have seen Gujarat change. You've seen it become a state. You've seen it under Congress, and then now you've seen it over the past 26 years as this BJP bastion. So I think I first want to take you back to your childhood. Growing up in an Ahmedabad, old Ahmedabad, what are the striking changes that you feel that you witnessed during your time? And how was it like then? Was it any different or?
Ahmedabad to me is unrecognizable today from the Ahmedabad of not only my growing up, but my youth, my early 30s, early 40s. I was born at a time when, and I was growing up at a time when Ahmedabad had visionaries. Huge business houses, my family included, the Lalbhais and Kasturbhai Lalbhai, who had a vision for what Ahmedabad and Gujarat should be 50 years from then. So they dreamt institutions for a new India and for a new Ahmedabad. And it was not about plugging their name onto anything. Nothing that anybody from the Lalbhai family or from any of the other business families or from my family carried the name of the family. So the purpose was not self-aggrandizement, but the purpose was to really create institutions that would serve the new nation and that would make Ahmedabad a city of education, research. So for instance, I sat on my father's lap when he and Louis Kahn were planning the IIM, little knowing that I would go then to the IIM. And I used to have conversations with Papa about why he was building this institution. And he would explain to me that India needed efficient managers to head institutions that needed to be set up to serve the most marginalized person. Education, hospitals, administration, agriculture, and so on. And the city was full of extremely talented and bright people from many different nations who had come together to build institutions like the ATIRA, the Indian Institute of Management, National Institute of Design. And there was a fervor of intellectualism. It was very capitalist, but the families, the 5 leading families, were committed to making a difference to the state and to the country. And I think there was an intellectual fervor, which I find completely missing today. There was a cosmopolitanism that I find completely missing today. There was a camaraderie between religions. Religion was not worn on the sleeve, it was just something that was. And casteism, certainly amongst the educated, was not as blatant as it is today.
You'd say that?
Oh yes, very much so. In the milieu that I was growing up in, including in Xavier's College, I went to Shreyas, which was the first Montessori school run by my aunt, and we were 6 and 8 in a class. Totally gender bias free, caste bias free, communal bias free, all of that. Then got thrown into Xavier's College, which had 100 people. But I cannot remember this kind of casteism that I see around me everywhere today, let alone communalism.
Okay. We should also introduce your dog.
This
as
is
we continue our
Begum. This
conversation.
is Begum, and she's one of my 5 dogs. Begum is a lockdown baby and loves interviews. She sits through all my interviews, all my Zoom sessions very quietly and loves people.
Great. So you were talking about, who would you count among some of the visionaries of Ahmedabad? What names come to
Kasturbai
you?
Lalbhai, my grandfather, Mallika Sarabhai, Chinubhai Chimanbhai, who was an early mayor and who had a foresight for the city, which was extraordinary. Papa certainly, Amma certainly, several people from the what is now the house of MG, the Girdharlal family, the Hati Singh family. They were just extraordinary people with a vision that went not only beyond the next 10 years, but also internationally. So, for instance, bringing textile people from wherever it was the best, or bringing architects from wherever it was the best. So it was not parochial at all. And what are the major institutions that have been built post the mid-70s?
In Gujarat.
In Gujarat. What are the major institutions that will actually change the history of India? The National Institute of Design changes the history of India. It changes the way design. I was 2 days ago in a fashion show of a man called Asif Sheikh, who has revived many different embroideries, and he brought together some of the best designers to work with groups of artisans to get them a new feel. That comes from that milieu.
So let's go back again, and you chose the arts, but you did you went to IIMs. Your father was a scientist, your mother's a dancer. So why did you veer towards the arts and not the science side of the family?
One very simple answer to that is that I wanted to do physics, chemistry, but they made us cut frogs. And I refused to cut a frog. So economic psychology is was. I will correct that. Papa was not a scientist for the sake of being a scientist. He chose science as a way of changing the way India was.
Yeah. And that comes through a lot in the series Rocket Boys that you've helped script.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Amma used dance to talk about issues like dowry killings, Dalit atrocities, and things like that. And I think my brother, who's an environmentalist, and I, through different ways, are really trying to do the same, trying to make it better for the last person, trying to bring a more equitable and just society. He does it through environmental work, I do it through the arts. But I am not a dancer because I'm a dancer. I am a dancer and a performer because I think those are some of the most potent languages to bring to the forefront subjects that people don't want to talk about.
In fact, actually, in the series, it comes out quite clearly that there's this patriotic fervor which is really driving your father.
Don't use the word patriotic. It's become such a dirty, filthy word.
Nationalism is patriot is still fine. Nationalism is the most strident, maybe slightly angry form of your love for your country. Patriotism is still, I think, it's an acceptable term.
Love for India, let's say that. Love for India and love for humanity.
But, that'll be interesting for our audience to know, when we were coming into your dance academy, there's an image of your father and there's an image of your mother. And you describe your mother as the scientist and you describe your father as the artist, explaining how both these people got together and helped each other and also helped the, helped art and science while being, not involved in art and science directly. But we were talking about this before the cameras got rolling. In the series, we don't see this a lot. We see them more as, more of an unhappy couple by the 5th episode or so, when they get married.
That's very wrong. Two things that I wanted in the series that haven't come through is, one is that without Papa's support and without Papa's insistence that Darpana gets started, Amma would have never built it. And so much so that on the outside where you saw the photographs are 3 lights. And in 1949, when they came back from Cambridge and settled down in Ahmedabad, and Papa convinced Amma to start an institution, he actually flew to London to learn lighting and brought back those 3 lights, which are still in working condition, and lit Amma's shows for many, many, many years. He did the sets, he lit the shows and everything. And the other thing that hasn't come out is that when Kartikeya and I were growing up, the parent who stayed at home to look after us was Papa, not Amma. Amma was constantly on tour. And they had decided that till I was 12 as the younger child, one of them would always be at home. So all the scrapes I got into were invariably for Papa to have to deal with.
Okay.
And that both of them considered their children to be of such importance that they felt that they would sacrifice or balance out their careers so that they were always here for us.
So you'd say that that's something the series didn't capture, the supportiveness.
It's not captured at all. It's not, and that they adored each other. The fact that Kamala came in and Papa also fell in love with her didn't take away from the fact that Papa and Amma deeply loved each other. That's the unhappiness. Otherwise, it would have been simple to just leave the family but to them, it was a deep commitment and a very deep abiding love.
But as a child, how did you kind of deal with it? And by deal with it, I mean that, we as kids have very idealized notions of our parents.
I hated Papa.
We wanted to see them.
I hated Papa. I stopped talking to him because I always was closer to Amma. And I felt when I found out because I was sleeping in their room one day and woke up and there was a to-do going on. And I stopped talking to him for the next few years. Which is why I also feel cheated that he died when I was 17. Because from the ages of 11 to 14, I didn't speak to him. And I kept telling Amma, why don't you divorce him? And she kept saying, but I love him and he loves me. And it's not as simple as you think. But I used to try and see how Molotov cocktails could be made so that I could bomb her. I'm not joking.
You mean your father?
Bomb Kamala.
Oh, I thought, okay.
Bomb her, yeah. And it was only when I was 14 that I started a conversation with Papa and understood the nuances of his pain and the nuances of being in a situation where you genuinely loved 2 women but had a deep familial connection with one. And so in the last 3 years when he was still alive, we became extremely close.
Okay.
And I became much less judgmental and understood the sort of moral dilemma that was involved and that all 3 of them were involved in. And as I grew up later, began understanding the sort of many layers of loving.
And so it wasn't as simple as what we see in...
Not as simple as what I saw at 11, not as nearly as simple as what is shown in the Rocket Boys.
So it was complicated. But
And I have to also tell you something very strange that most people don't know, which is that when Amma got news of Papa's death. I was in Bombay, she was in Bombay. Papa was supposed to come back that day and bring us for New Year's Eve to Ahmedabad. After she booked a call to my brother Karthikeya, after she called me, and after she called Papa's mother, the next person she called was Kamla.
Oh, wow. So there was that respect for...
Kamla was Amma's best friend in Shantiniketan. It was Amma who introduced her.
Our generation likes to say it's complicated when you ask them for relationship status. This is definitely like way more complicated, but I guess also human.
No, but that was great. That was the grace that my mother had.
Yeah, yeah. Let's talk about Ahmedabad. When you were talking about the Ahmedabad that you grew up in, the Gujarat that you knew, you said that there wasn't space for this communal tension or feelings of ill will among various religions. And it's true that even, when you're in Delhi or when you're out of Gujarat, the first thing that you associate Gujarat with is this Hindu-Muslim tension or Hindu-Muslim riots. And I don't know how fair that is on the people of Gujarat, because surely there's more to the state than hatred among various communities. But let's just talk a bit about what I want to know from you is that people would say that 2002 became this televised riot. Everyone was talking about it because of the first televised riot. But Gujarat had known riots. 69 and 85, 2 years. Were you here during the 85?
69 I was.
Okay. And what was it like then? How old were you then at 69?
69, 15, 14.
So you were young.
I was in college.
What do you remember of those riots?
To put it stupidly, people like us were not involved. It was very much the criminal margins on both sides. And it was turf wars that spread to a lot of innocent people. They were brutal, but they were not orchestrated. The middle class didn't get involved. They didn't go out in cars and loot shops as they did in 2002. In 2002, the rioters had lists of which houses were Hindu, which shops were Hindu and which were Muslim, which buildings were Muslim but had a Hindu shop. They had such methodical electoral lists of who to burn, who to kill, who to rape, and who to let escape. There was nothing like that. The riots were very bad in 69 and 85, but 95% of society was not involved. That is what changed in 2002.
Would you say in 2002, large parts of society was involved?
In looting, certainly. In looting and in rooting for the rioters, certainly.
In drawing room conversations that you had, did you ever...
In 2002, before I was made a pariah or before?
Before, during 2002. How would you assess that more people were okay with the 2002 riots? Where does that understanding come from for you?
My neighbors were all going out in cars to loot shops. In cars. And then calling other friends and saying, the mattresses are good in this shop and we are looting, so come. My dentist might have been out there, my gynaecologist might have been out there. Unheard of.
Yeah. So that's the main difference that you would say.
No, also that by that time, people had been warped into being convinced that this was the right thing to do to assert Gujarati male pride. Go out and rape.
Really? Was that like a conversation that could happen? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And Gujarati men have been laughed at for 5 decades or 6 decades, if not more.
So do you think that there's this deep sense of sort of victimhood or sort of
deep sense of
being
insecurity and wanting to be a man? And this was their way of proving how to be a man. And to cheer. The Gujarati women cheered their men on.
Yeah?
Yeah.
You'd say that. So you would say that the big difference basically would be that...
I am sure that beneath the surface, beneath like 3 layers of the surface, there was a Jain hood and there was a Hindu hood and there was a Dalit hood and there was a Muslim hood. So whether, for instance, people at the uneducated or middle class levels actually sat and chatted with somebody, I doubt that happened. At many educated levels like my family, it always happened. But this surface dismissal, hatred, turning to violence that has now for the last 20 years become the norm. Of course Muslims are second-class citizens. Of course they have to be ghettoized. Of course they must bow down to us. Unheard of, undreamt of, unthought of.
But a lot of the kids who've grown up after 2002, and this is from conversations again that we've got, and I'm talking about younger people, they kind of almost speak of the last, 20 years and more under the BJP rule as really peaceful. That listen, our parents spoke of curfews, we have not seen curfews. Our parents spoke of riots, we have not seen any riots growing up. So what would you say to this current generation that says that there's peace in Gujarat?
No, there are no curfews, but there is so much happening beneath the surface. And no, there are no curfews because most Muslims and Dalits are terrified. The reprisal is so fast and so deadly. Why else would they need to so openly go and help in Hindu processions and prove their loyalty? This kind of wearing your loyalty on the sleeve was not necessary pre-2002. And it's getting worse and worse by the day.
What did you make of all the news headlines that came out this year about, what happened in Kedia, what happened in certain Navratri pandals where it was written that Muslims should not be allowed?
I'm deeply...
But is that the no? What I'm trying to also understand is someone who's been here and you've known Gujarat so well, you're Gujarati yourself. This charge on the Gujarati...
I'm partially Gujarati.
Okay. But this is your home.
True.
So
True.
This charge on the Gujarati society that it's communal and that it has accepted the fact that Muslims must be, second class citizens.
Or fifth class citizen. It is.
You find that up to be absolutely true.
Totally. And we seem to have, on the one hand, there is great distress. There is economic distress. You see more entire families committing suicide in Gujarat than I have seen in the history of this, at least in my 60 years. There are more people who are so aggressive and frustrated because they are treated like bugs and insects every single day. And as a result of which, at a tiny misdirection somewhere, they kill people. They lynch people. Where does this level of violence come from? It can only come from deeply suppressed frustration and anger and angst and unhappiness. But on the other hand, we like to paint ourselves the golden state. Now, I ask you this, that if we were such a golden state, if we are such a golden state, why does every second Gujarati want to migrate to America, Australia, or England? Why?
Something to think of.
Something absolutely to think of. And more, so how many illegal Gujaratis are caught every day? This family that froze in Canada recently. Gujarati, Patel, Gujarati.
Now, you've been a critic of Modi, and this is well known. You've, said a lot of things publicly. I think there was an appearance as a chief guest at NID, which was also cancelled following your statements on Mr. Modi. So,
no, it was not cancelled following my statements on Mr. Modi or the BJP government. I have been... Listen, I am somebody who is against dividing India on any lines, whether communal, whether gender or anything, and I will fight anybody. So it's not Mr. Modi, it is an ideology that I'm against. I think that any ideology that divides this society in terms of something as personal as religion, why should we become a religious theocratic state like Pakistan? That is what we are becoming. So I have always been a critic. Even when the Congress was doing something, I was a critic of the Congress if I felt it was doing wrong.
And you said that you also worked with the BJP government,
I have worked very closely with the BJP government because, as far as I was concerned, I am deeply concerned with development. I think through the performing arts, we have an amazing language to change hearts and minds, to educate people who don't really want to go and listen to boring lectures about why they should be doing something. And I work closely with Keshubhai Patel. I work closely with Ashok Bhatt. We did so many health campaigns with Ashok Bhatt. I did so many women education campaigns with the BJP government. So it's not that Vajpayee and I were very close friends. We were personally extremely close friends who had long chats. So it's not that, it's what is being done that I stand up against. And NID, there was pressure from whoever that they cancelled a convocation.
Vajpayee and you were close friends at that?
Vajpayee and I were very close friends. I went on that bus trip with him and we became very, very close friends.
So how would you distinguish, say, that we talked about old Ahmedabad, new Ahmedabad, so this old BJP and new BJP that you worked with, that you had, chats with them now?
I think the velvet glove has gone, and there is a single point agenda, and that is to create us into a theocratic state.
And what I was coming to earlier was that you have been a critic of Modi. How has it been being in Gujarat, living in Ahmedabad, choosing this as your space of work, as your space of profession, and being pretty vocal, critiquing Mr. Modi, critiquing the BJP? Has it come at a cost for you?
What do you think? You see the reprisals all around. What do you think? What do your viewers think?
But personally, I mean, even if you don't want to go into specific details, because there is this, we know of what's happened with Tista.
In 2003, 4, 5, there were so many false cases filed against me that I had to go to the Supreme Court. My passport was taken away. I was visiting the police station twice a day because one part-time student of mine whose grandfather happened to run the RSS newspaper or magazine or whatever it was, accused me of stopping her from illegally migrating to the United States. So a case was filed against me for stopping somebody from illegally immigrating to the United States. And that lasted close to a year.
Okay.
And it was all organized so that the summons for my arrest came on the eve of the Diwali vacation in the court. And I was tipped off and went into hiding for 20 days so that I only arrived back in Ahmedabad the day that I could apply for bail. And I had to go all the way to the Supreme Court with an SLP before the court dismissed it, saying, and then I was given a C summary. And but it started with that and it just continued.
And how's it been now?
I'm still standing and I refuse to cede my Gujarat. It's the state where I have, and my family has poured so much, and so much of the state is flourishing because of the efforts of families like mine. Why should I give up my Gujarat?
But did you ever feel that, listen, why do I need to get into this politics side of it or be vocal? I can do my dance, I can do my performing art.
It was never like that. It was never like that. I didn't want to become political. I didn't want to go into politics. I was brought up in a family that raised their voice for the voiceless, that raised their voice if they thought injustice was being done. That was what I was doing. That's what I continue doing.
And briefly, you had a stint in politics. You contested against Advani. You joined AAP also.
For one day. The next day, Kumar Vishwas made anti-women comments and I quit.
So it's hard for you to be in politics because it's very difficult to be pure in politics. There has to be some sort of...
It's an old boys club. And, for 5 years...
Are you rooting for AAP though, this election? Now that it's... No.
For 5 years before I stood for elections in 2009, I went around the country saying that if we genuinely want this country to be developed and the most marginalized not to be the most marginalized, we need to get elected on a platform of good governance. I don't care what your ideology is. If you believe that good governance needs to be delivered to the people, then come into the arena for 7 years, work for 2 years in whatever constituency you choose, get the trust of people, and if 200 of us stand, and if even 30 get elected, we will make a significant difference. Remember that you'll never be re-elected again because we will not be scratching people's back. We will not be indulging in corruption. We want to show that there is a system in place that can work. And if you show this, then the trajectory of democracy will change. The trajectory of electoral politics can change. Today, nobody believes that a government will deliver. Nobody. It's this corruption and that corruption and that corruption, or who will eat what. I mean, how many places do you have where things are actually delivered and you actually see massive, consistent change? That's what I was opting for. After 5 years, nobody was willing to do that. So I said, I will try it. I will see if I can actually run an election that is transparent. Can I be completely transparent about money? So every rupee I collected and every rupee I spent was up there on the internet every evening. I have got a room full of notes that I kept. I personally have notes from 2.1 lakh of my constituents. And I know exactly who doesn't get water, what gets flooded, and so on and so forth. Tell me one other politician-elect who actually has that much data. So it can be done.
But then you didn't win. So the point is that maybe there's no space for idealism in politics. You need to be pragmatic.
I don't agree. I think there is no place anymore for independence standing. Unless you go to some really inconsequential place where neither the BJP nor the Congress or any of the ruling parties are particularly interested, and stand from there. What used to happen is that both Mr. Advani and the Congress candidate were both breaking rules. And when I went to the Election Commission, my complaints were not taken into consideration for 10 days at a time. And theirs were immediately. And the minute they saw me as rustling up things, Mr. Advani for the first time came and stayed in Gujarat for 3 weeks. So I used to joke, after I lost, I used to joke with my constituencies and say that, at least you got to see the person you've been elected for 20 years because you've never seen him before.
But would you say politics is your, how was your experience overall? And would you say this is something?
It was a great learning curve. And I think the systems are in place. If good people want to make change, then this country can get developed. So the problem is not the system. The problem is the kickbacks and the brickbats and the lures and the purchasing of MPs and MLAs and the big money and the big corporates and all of that. It's so corrupt. The whole system is so corrupt. Nobody wants to grow trees. They want to cut them down.
But there's one thing, and that's my last question on politics, and something to think of, that we have a lot of criticism of politicians. Even, for example, Mr. Modi or, anyone from the BJP. But there's something that they know about the people, which is why they're coming back again and again. There's some pulse that they're able to touch.
Absolutely.
There's some work they're able to do. In fact, with Modi, deliveries during COVID, the direct benefit transfers, delivery of ration did work really well. And this is why people in villages speak about how he actually helped them during COVID, or the central government came to their rescue during COVID. So there is that sense of something working. And there's something that politicians surely know about people, which works for them, which activists sometimes are unable to understand. So how would you look at this criticism of activism that, they're rabble-rousers, they're troublemakers, quote unquote, they're complaining all the time, but there's something about the Indian people that they can't put their finger on, which is why they can say whatever they want to say about Modi or, any other politician, but they come back to power and again and again. So how do you kind of assess this?
I think activists don't play on the lowest common denominator of fear, hatred, and insecurity. I think politicians do, and successful politicians do so even more successfully. And activists, by definition, or the left by definition, believes in consensus, not on a presidential figure who rules every diktat. I think this is the difference, that we by definition believe in consensus, which always takes longer.
Now, in 2022, you deliver a lecture, Ram Bapat Memorial Lecture, where you said that in a world where we don't want to listen, understand, or hear another point of view, it's perhaps only art that can through the walls that we have built and reach, that can get through the walls that we have built and reach a place where we are open, vulnerable, and open to change. Now, I think it's very interesting, and though one could argue that art in India has been restricted to an elite space. So what we do in exhibitions or museums, or even with the cultural performances and classical art especially, they've been the preserve of the elite. How fair do you think that criticism is? And do you think you personally have made an effort to really transcend sort of class barriers with your art?
Of course. The fact that I go and do a piece of mine, like a rabid piece of mine, like Sita's daughters, to 8,000 women BD workers in Kheda. Or I go and do it to 12 multiple rape victims, multiple gang rape victims under a bawal tree in Kutch. Yes. And yes, it is elitist, but it doesn't need to be. I mean, 15th century, the rulers of southern India tell the gurus of Bharatanatyam that Bharatanatyam is something that talks only to the educated. We need to teach these values of good and bad and right and wrong to the person who is not educated. So devise a dance form. Kuchipudi gets born. A storyteller's form, a sexy form, a sprightly form that says, hey guys, do you know what Krishna said? Let me tell you. So it's not esoteric, it's not ascetic, it's not ethereal. It's Punch and Judy drama to get people involved. the carvings on our temples. Are they lascivious? No, they were to tell people that you have to go through all of this before you can find yourself. We have just created a new performance based on 12th century Fariduddin Attari book called The Conference of the Birds. We premiered it 2 nights ago. We are going to do shows. Through a search for the king of birds, the Simurgh, it leads birds as a metaphor of people through what is right and wrong, what is success, what does the chase for gold mean, what is power, what does it mean to be near power, all the existential questions that we should be asking ourselves and don't ask ourselves are in that performance. When people see it, what happens in the end, thousands of birds start, 7 birds get to this king, and when the doors open, all they see is a mirror. The journey has to be inwards. You have to find the deity inside you. This is the basic Vedantic philosophy. So when you do it through a performance that's exciting and that's fun, and I mean, in one of my performances, which I have just redone called Past Forward, I have used the Tadhom project who created for Gully Boys. I took 2 books, a book called Chup by Deepa Narayan, and another book called Simply Single. And I took from there what is the conditioning that is given to girls in this country, even in the most educated families. ऐसा मत करो तुम लड़की हो, ऐसे मत हंसो तुम लड़की हो, चुप करके रहो, adjust कर लो. And I've created a rap piece that brings the house down.
Lovely.
And then audience members come to me and said, हम चुप नहीं रहेंगे. Now you're getting through in a way that no amount of lecturing them is getting through. And the very fact that after 40 years of a performing career, I am still asked to do my radical pieces, it means I'm getting through.
What do you define as your radical pieces if you were to tell me 2 of your 2 top radical pieces?
Sita's Daughters has done 600 performances in 40 countries. It starts by Sita telling Ram, if you are a god, why did you fall into all of this? Is it because you wanted to prove that you were a great god? Did you not know that the deer was a Rakshasa? Then how can you call yourself a god? Because you're supposed to be omniscient. And she says in the end that, yeah, Rama, I'm happy to be free of you, because now I can bring up my sons to be not insecure and not untrustworthy.
In fact, in 2006, when you, on your Mahabharat performance, you said that when you ended your work in the Mahabharat, you were no longer a dancer and an activist. You'd become a performer who used activism and performance together. It's exactly what you're talking about with your radical pieces.
Because, I had always seen Amma doing it. And I thought, as I was growing up, that all artists did it. And then I got a very rude shock that, no, Amma was one of a very small handful. Like Habib Tanveer was one, and people like that. But there were very, very few. And that was the radical departure, to be using the arts to talk about society and the evils of society or the weaknesses of society or for empowerment was radical. I never thought I could do it. I never thought I could be the creator. I always thought I was a fantastic medium for creators. But it was during the 5 years of doing Draupadi, my interpretation of Draupadi, and seeing women from Harlem and from Aboriginal areas of Australia and very svelte French women. And Draupadi touched all of them. All of them said that this is the kind of woman we want to be. Somebody who does not give up her femininity. Somebody who says, I have a brain and I have a womb and I'm proud of both and I will use both. And this somehow cut across. And that's when I came out thinking, I have to force myself to create. Because what I want to do with the arts is not something that I can explain to a writer to do.
But today we're also in a space where there's an outrage industry. And it's very methodical and meticulous in picking up, strands that they could get angry about. But there is this sort of a resistance today, or there's a public mood at least created that, why do you have to touch Hindu gods or Hindu mythology? Why do you have to re-interpret it in a way that we don't see them?
My question is that on the one hand, you say the gods are larger than us. And on the other hand, you, the weakling, thinks you can protect the gods. But does nobody see the absurdity of this? I am a practicing Hindu.
So do you approach
as a practicing Hindu, I have arguments with my goddess every day. And I ask her questions. That for me is Hinduism. Not 10 commandments that some somebody somewhere, some male somewhere, has decided that these are the 10 correct ways of celebrating your God.
So when you approach these texts, do you approach them as a devotee too? Because you say you're practicing Hindu.
I am a practicing Hindu.
What is your relationship with God, so to speak, or how do you
Friends,
see?
people I ask questions to, people I argue with, people I don't think, people I have created for my sanity. My little bronze Devi that I carry around with me and that sits there, and the Nataraja that sits there at every performance, are people I have created because I need to know or believe that there is some kind of larger sanity to this very cruel, very ugly world that we have created. It is I've created it. Nature is the only truth.
Is there a particular strand of Hinduism that
Not
resonates
that anybody
with you?
would
Like,
recognize. I have
no,
my
I'm saying
own.
philosophically, or is there something that, because you spoke of Vedanta and all that, so
Yeah, question everything.
okay.
Accept nothing.
Um,
Argue about everything. That is the Hinduism I believe in.
Carrying forward that question, you said that after you lost your mother in 2016, you dealt with it through meditative techniques and non-violent communication and yoga. I was just curious about this. Would you want to elaborate a bit on
That's not what I said. I said that I've said in my book that when my daughter and I got estranged, I was very broken. I'm sure she was too, but she wasn't around me, so I don't know. And felt myself reduced to somebody I wasn't. And I realized that nobody from the outside could help me get back my strength, and that too many things depended on my being the kind of person I was. So I went through very many things, but nonviolent communication is something that helped me tremendously in isolating and disengaging with the unhappiness, with the bitterness, with the pain, and saying, yes, but that is not me. My emotion is not me. I can actually, through various techniques, separate who my essential being is from the stormy emotion that I'm now feeling. And I think that's what helped.
And have your relationships with your daughter gotten
Alas,
better?
no.
No, okay. What was, if I may ask, what was the reason for the estrangement?
I don't know.
Okay, so let's talk about art. And now we spoke about living in Gujarat and being anti-Modi, and you said it has come at a huge cost. But I was more keen on even understanding, because we spoke of art as an elite form, what it needs to do to get to people. And sometimes what's also important is state intervention. State helping artists, helping the performing arts, people involved in this to make their work more accessible. How do you think the Gujarat government has fared in promoting arts and culture? And are you doing this excellent?
I'm doing
Or
zero.
are you doing zero? Okay. So you would not rate them as...
Gujarat is not an art state.
Yeah.
There is very little understanding. They have put up these big tamashas, but there's no understanding of the arts here. And everybody wants everything for free, or they think the arts will just exist.
There's been no government help in terms of... I'm not
Madhavsi-
just talking about your institution,
No,
but
I'm
in
not talking
general.
about
Yeah.
Madhavsi Solanki was the only one who had a feeling for the arts. He loved poetry, he loved literature, and because he was personally involved. Otherwise, the Sangeet Natak Academy and the Sahitya Academy, they're always fighting about who will become president, and always giving people money that they think will do the Jai Jaikar.
But the average Gujarati, where do you think the arts sit for them in terms of priority as a society?
As long as it's free, very high. As long as they have to pay for it, very low.
But they pay for movies and all.
Movies, yes, but that's not art.
Filmmakers will disagree with you. So, and because I ask this also because this, the first impression that comes to you when you talk about Gujarat is business, that business-mindedness, this one single track mind of...
And yet, over
work.
Navaratri, everybody dances.
Yeah.
So there was a huge culture, always has been, of folk dance and folk music. Amma and Kumudini Lakhya single-handedly changed it so that every second household now has somebody learning Kathak or somebody learning Bharatanatyam. That's also true. But that doesn't mean that there is an understanding. They learn it as part of their CV, and it's something that helps in the marriage market. And they don't necessarily become people who want to view the arts. So, and also, you know, Gujaratis have a huge sense of insecurity. So, for instance, any third-rate thing from Bombay is something that they will go and watch. But something amazing coming out of Ahmedabad. And yet this is contrasted with this thing, oh, I am a Gujarati. And so it's a very complex situation of insecurity and tom-tomming Gujarat's pride.
Why have you, I'm just curious to know, like, why did you choose Ahmedabad as your place of work and your...
I was born here, I grew up here, the institution was here.
But since you don't seem very, very fond of Gujaratis.
I love Gujarat. Whether I'm fond of Gujaratis in their current status is a different issue. But this is my karma bhumi. Why should I give it up?
Great. You were telling us about this painting. I think before we wrap up our interview, tell us a bit about what this painting is all about.
Is of the very famous Ellis Bridge.
Which
that
I've
was
seen.
the first bridge across this Ahmedabad. And for 600 years, the Ellis Bridge came later, but there used to be a Sunday market. From the time of Ahmed Shah, there used to be a Sunday market on the banks of the river. And when Ellis Bridge was built, the market was underneath it. And it was only for the riverfront project that this whole thing was destroyed and relocated to part of the riverfront. But this is a picture of when it was a very vibrant Sunday market where if you had a theft in your house, you went to the Sunday market because you would invariably find it there.
Great. And will you be voting this election?
Of course, of course.
You know, Gujarat has also thrown a lot of youth leaders over the past 3 years.
Many of whom turncoat. I mean, Jignesh Memani is a great
But,
friend. Jignesh Memani is somebody who was with me all through my election. He's somebody in whose integrity I greatly believe. But that's not where I vote.
Okay. But if you were to, you know, tell us about contemporary politicians, Gujarati.
I know nobody because nobody's done anything.
No.
They're all unknown faces.
So
The only known face is Mr. Modi
I
and
think
Amit
I can
Shah.
guess where your vote's going. Nota.
No, because I think
No,
that's
Nota.
wrong. I
Okay,
think
that's a
Nota
waste.
is wrong. It's a waste. We had two Gujaratis during the independence movement and we have two Gujaratis now.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Mallika, for taking out the time
Thank you.
for speaking with us. Thank you, guys. I hope you enjoyed that interview. That was part of our another election show, which is in Ahmedabad right now. We're going to be moving out of the city soon and we'll catch you probably in Surat, Dediapada and Kevadia. We're going to go see the Statue of Unity. Unity. Thank you, guys.
The subscription model is something that keeps Newslaundry afloat, but we need hundreds of thousands of people to completely transform the news ecosystem. So you pay for news, so it serves you. So click on the link with this video, subscribe to Newslaundry and pay to keep news free और गर्व से कहो मेरे खर्च पर आज़ाद है खबरें.